thought that social anxiety was something that I would have to deal with forever. But luckily, Mark Metry showed me how to reprogram my brain and showed me into a life that I never thought was possible. Hi, I'm Czekanski, and for over 2 decades, I dealt with social anxiety. The voice of social doubt would throb in my head like a screaming newborn baby. I look around in so many moments and see how people would easily make friends with people, and they'd walk up to strangers and have these engaging conversations for long periods of time. And all I would sit there and think is like, why is being social so out of my reach? And that was the narrative that really played in my head for a long period of time. So that when people, my brain was always looking for confirmation of that. So when people would say, Brian, you're not a people person, or Brian, you don't talk enough, or Brian, why don't you have any close friends? That only offered confirmation of that narrative, and that voice of social doubt only got louder and louder and louder as I got older, till eventually I got to the point where I kind of just gave up. I started to avoid all those situations where I knew that negative voice was going to come out and be the loudest. I only spoke to people when they spoke to me, when they initiated conversations. I put up these huge walls so that people wouldn't be able to get close to me or to learn more about me, because I didn't want to risk any chance of them figuring out kind of my greatest weakness, which was kind of, my social anxiety and not being able to connect with people. It was kind of something, it was kind of like my kryptonite. Like I didn't want anybody to know that I just didn't have the social ability to form relationships and to be out there and have conversations with people. And, needless to say, I don't have to tell you that that's not a great way to live. And certainly for me, it was a very lonely period of my life. Eventually, about 7 years ago, I hit rock bottom. When I was growing up, people would always tell me that, the day that you get married is going to be one of the best days of your life. But for me, it was something that I always, came to dread. Not because I don't love my wife. I love my wife. But because that day was one of those that on full display was my greatest weakness, my greatest failure, that ability to connect with people. So while my wife had hundreds of different people flying in from all over the country, all these friendships that she'd fostered over her entire life, like on my side, I had my family and not much else. Like social anxiety had really killed off a lot of the relationships over the years and really prevented me from forming new ones. So really just to develop that, not only like it was empty on my side, but also that empty feeling. And it was really on that day where I kind of vowed to myself that I would never let that happen again. So I started, I hired a therapist, I hired a series of different mindset coaches to, make some progress along the way. And I did. But none of them really offered the prescription to finally get rid of social anxiety. It was always this something that was kind of like a chain around my leg that I was always kind of carrying around. And what I didn't appreciate then and what I appreciate now is that I really needed help from somebody that had gone through social anxiety, that really understood the implications of it, how it showed up on day-to-day life, and it really found a way out, which is why I was really happy to stumble upon Mark and his book and eventually his course, because he had lived through it. He was kind of speaking my language. He was talking about experiences that I was going through as well, and he'd found a way out, and he'd helped people along the way get rid of their social anxiety as well. But that's not to say that I wasn't skeptical of his work. I still remember reaching out to him last year and saying, I really love your mission of eliminating social anxiety, but if I look at your course, which is so low priced, it doesn't seem like something that you are that seems possible. Like people aren't going to believe you that you can deliver on such a promise with such low of a price. But eventually I got over that. A couple months later, I got over that and I joined his course. And it was really early on that I kind of developed that belief that this is the perfect solution for me. I think it was like day number 3, video number 3 within his course, where I really had full belief in terms of this being the right solution. And that's exactly what he did. He allowed me to eliminate social anxiety and really move forward. So, and it really kind of came through in really simple steps. So, one of the key metaphors that he kind of shared in his course is kind of thinking about social anxiety as kind of like a virus that infects a computer. So in step 1 of his process, it really, you're really getting awareness of what are the implications of social anxiety? How is it showing up in day-to-day life? And are you truly aware of what you're up against? And it's only when you really have a full awareness of what you're up against that you can, finally move through the solution. And that's what he did for me. And I really recognized like there were certain things like consciously and unconsciously that I was doing on a day-to-day basis that are actually feeding through my and making my social anxiety worse. So having awareness of those things that like, okay, I'm doing this and it's making that voice in my head even louder. Okay, now I can stop doing that. And now I can develop some better habits. And that was what step 2 was all about. Really kind of thinking about my daily habits and instituting new ones and starting to be an advocate for myself, starting to change the language in my brain, really reprogramming the brain that I could finally put that social anxiety, kind of hitting that mute button for it so that it didn't affect me. It wasn't impacting my day-to-day life, and really creating some positive habits around that, really taking the oxygen away from social anxiety so that it slowly died out over time and really created that more positive narrative that I was looking for. So with, social anxiety kind of in the background now, as I got past it, really got to kind of step 3 of Mark's process, where it's like really all about kind of rebuilding your life. So that's where I started. And again, he shows you how to do it in a step-by-step process. It's not, fully, just jumping out there and doing crazy things. He kind of walks you through by the hand in terms of like, how do you actually do this? How do you become a lot more social in your day-to-day life? How do you put yourself in environments where you can start to form new relationships and make friends? And I think for me, gave me the process to kind of lower those walls that I had put up for a long period of time, so I can start to build, share some of that vulnerability, share a little bit more about myself so that I can form some of these connections, form some of these friendships that I was looking for a long period of time, but just wasn't really willing to, put myself out there. So, incredibly fulfilling to actually have that social anxiety in the background, but also have those new habits, those new ways of living, so that I can start to form new relationships and a new way of life that I never really thought was possible. So now in a few weeks, I'm going to, I signed myself up for a business conference where I'm going to be in a room full of hundreds of different people I've never met before. And really the idea of that 3-day conference is to have conversations with people, form those new relationships. And I know those are going to be fulfilling not only for my life, but for my business at the end of that. And that's why I'm really excited to go down there. And this was something that, this would be another example of something that I would have avoided like the plague before getting Mark's help, but kind of just shows you on the flip side, what is life like for me, where I'm actually going out there and being proactive and forming relationships, going out there and putting myself in opportunities to build new relationships, not only from a business perspective, but from a personal perspective. And I certainly can thank Mark for that, and certainly changed my life over that process. So if social doubt and social anxiety is something that is impacting your life in any way, shape, or form, and you're thinking that this is something that you might have to live with forever, I would highly encourage you to reach out to Mark or go through his course, just like I did. And he's going to show you that step-by-step process to not only being aware of what you're up against, but kind of that pathway out of it. And I can guarantee that it'll be well worth your time and your investment.